In a stunning turn of events that has seized global attention, the Trump administration has abruptly halted all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, leaving the war-torn nation grappling with the possibility of a weakened defense at the most critical moment. Experts warn this surprising move could quickly reshape the battlefield dynamics in Ukraine, pushing President Volodymyr Zelensky into an impossible choice between safeguarding his people and bowing to political pressure from one of his country's strongest partners. Many observers see this pause in military aid as an unprecedented shift in the long-established alliance between the United States and Ukraine, especially since U.S. weaponry has helped fend off heavy Russian assaults for over 3 years. Reports indicate that the abrupt decision follows a dramatic Oval Office confrontation where President Trump's frustration boiled over, culminating in a tense exchange with Zelensky, who was summoned to Washington with hopes of finalizing a deal on Ukraine's mineral resources. While no final resolution emerged from that heated meeting, it led the White House to freeze transfers of vital arms and munitions that had already been approved under previous administrations, including hardware waiting in Poland, transit hubs, and even on cargo ships. This stunning pause has alarmed European leaders who fear a domino effect across the continent, prompting them to revisit the strength of their own defenses and calling urgent summits to reinforce unity in the face of renewed Russian aggression. Polish officials in particular have voiced their concerns at being left out of any prior consultation, emphasizing that the abrupt nature of the announcement destabilizes ongoing strategic planning and undermines trust among NATO allies. France and the United Kingdom, both key European powers, have signaled they will accelerate military cooperation with Ukraine if necessary. But insiders point out these nations lack the extensive capabilities and production lines of the United States. For Ukraine, the timing could not be worse, since the war continues to flare in contested regions where Russian-backed forces push relentlessly, and advanced weaponry from the United States has often made the difference between holding territory and ceding it. Real-time examples on the ground illustrate how U.S.-made systems like ATACMS long-range missiles have allowed Ukrainian forces to hit strategic targets behind Russian lines, damaging Russian supply routes and slowing their advances into vital Ukrainian cities. Analysts warn that a sustained halt in U.S. support would exhaust Ukraine's stockpiles of high-end weaponry within months, diminishing its ability to accurately strike Russian positions or protect its skies against bombers and missile attacks. Local Ukrainian officials are deeply worried about the potential collapse of frontline defenses, especially in areas close to critical infrastructure routes that keep Ukraine's economy moving and allow medical supplies to reach civilian populations under siege. Trump's insistence on a swift end to the war has triggered speculation that his administration might leverage the slowdown in arms deliveries to pressure Zelensky into negotiating from a position of extreme weakness. Military experts highlight that any forced settlement undermined by withheld U.S. support would almost certainly favor the Kremlin's interests, a development that could embolden Russia to further test the resolve of Western nations in other contested regions. Meanwhile, White House officials have stated that pausing assistance is only a temporary measure designed to ensure Ukraine remains truly committed to seeking peace. Though critics label this stance as naive, pointing to Russia's history of breaking ceasefire agreements. Senior Republican figures in Congress appear split on the issue, some echoing the president's stance that the United States should not shoulder an endless war, while others argue that limiting support to Ukraine invites more aggression from Moscow and raises global security threats. In the midst of these tensions, the emotional toll on everyday Ukrainians is immense. For years, they have relied on foreign aid to keep vital services running, from paying teachers and doctors to maintaining crumbling infrastructure in war-torn regions. Without additional shipments from the United States, Ukraine risks depleting its defense reserves and losing ground in the east and south, a scenario that could intensify the humanitarian crisis by forcing more people to flee their homes or face relentless shelling. American foreign aid to Ukraine has historically enjoyed bipartisan support, especially after Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the expanded invasion in 2022. But the Trump administration's dramatic change in tone now casts doubt on Washington's long-term commitment. Economic stress is also a grave concern, with the Biden-era minerals deal now in limbo and potential foreign investors questioning the stability of Ukraine's market as its biggest ally pulls back military and diplomatic support. Observers wonder if this pause is part of a broader plan by the Trump administration to reset U.S.-Russia relations, though many fear such a reset would come at Ukraine's expense and embolden the Kremlin to push further into Eastern Europe. Russia wasted no time celebrating the White House decision, with spokesperson Dmitry Peskov remarking that the United States was the primary supplier of the war so far, painting the new American stance as a welcome development. Ukrainian lawmakers like Oleksandr Merestko argue that halting aid now only plays into Putin's hands, risking a forced capitulation that sets a dangerous precedent for international affairs and erodes the principle of national sovereignty. Back in Washington, the White House hosted high-level talks with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and others, each seemingly torn between pressing for immediate peace and preserving the long-standing alliance with Ukraine. Critics say halting support at this time is a reckless gamble, reminiscent of historical events where strategic indecision allowed aggressive powers to seize advantage, leading to even costlier conflicts down the line. They also note the morale blow to Ukrainian soldiers who have fought relentlessly on the front lines, emboldened by the knowledge that the world's largest military superpower had their back in this existential fight. Yet Trump maintains that Ukraine must show gratitude and willingness to negotiate or else risk the fate of losing support from the United States altogether. A stance that has raised eyebrows among international diplomats. On social media, Zelensky has responded by reiterating that real peace can only be achieved through security guarantees, robust enough to deter any future Russian incursions, not by hurried deals that sacrifice territorial integrity. Meanwhile, everyday people in Ukraine share stories of living under the constant threat of air raid sirens, needing U.S.-supplied Patriot systems to intercept incoming missiles, and praising the protective armor vehicles provided by Western partners. However, that assistance line now runs cold, marking an unsettling chapter in a war that has already displaced millions, claimed thousands of lives, and created instability across the European continent for years. Many Democrats in the U.S. have labeled the pause a direct threat to American national security, as they believe Russia's expansionist aims will not stop at Ukraine, and that undermining Ukraine only encourages further aggression. European allies remain on high alert and are already mobilizing resources to fortify their own defenses and those of their neighbors, turning to emergency sessions of the EU Commission and NATO gatherings for immediate solutions. Nevertheless, the U.S. remains the linchpin of Ukraine's military strategy, thanks to its advanced technology and deep stockpiles, meaning even a short pause can significantly degrade Ukraine's operational effectiveness over time. Some analysts predict that if no resolution is found soon, Ukraine could face crippling shortages of essentials, such as artillery shells, precision guidance systems, and radar technology, placing Ukrainian troops in immediate danger. Public sentiment in the U.S. is also divided, with war-weary factions calling for an end to foreign entanglements, while others see the war in Ukraine as a critical stand against authoritarian expansion, reminiscent of Cold War tensions. Real-time examples from the battlefield in eastern Ukraine show how reliant Ukrainian forces have become on advanced drones and intelligence data from the United States, enabling them to target critical Russian command centers more efficiently. This synergy of American and Ukrainian military coordination has kept a semblance of balance against Russia's numerical advantage, but the abrupt freeze in aid threatens to upend that balance almost overnight. If negotiations fail in the coming weeks, we may see a humanitarian fallout as more civilians flee the conflict zone, especially if Zelensky concludes that a lack of military support will force him to pull back from contested areas. Throughout Europe, concerns are rising about the Trump administration's willingness to make unilateral moves that override Allied consensus, leaving many governments questioning how to protect their own security interests a few steps away from traditional commitments. Zelensky's frustration is palpable as he tries to maintain a resolute front for his people, while also understanding that the world's leading democracy is the backbone of his country's defensive strength and overall war effort. In this pivotal moment, the question remains whether diplomatic efforts can salvage the partnership before irrevocable damage is done, or if the pause in aid becomes a watershed event redefining the power balance in Eastern Europe for years to come. Description: a shocking move by the Trump administration has stopped critical military aid shipments to Ukraine, sparking fears of a looming crisis that could reshape the balance of power in Europe. In this video, we delve into the dramatic Oval Office between President Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky, examine the potential collapse of Ukraine's frontline defense, and explore the global ramifications of this unprecedented break in U.S.-Ukrainian relations. Will Zelensky bow to U.S. demands or stand firm in the face of Russian aggression?